Why is it that Islam maintained a protected status for so long, even though Islam has proven to be, and will always prove to be, a violent, hateful religion? It is the heartbeat of Islam. Whereas the heartbeat of Christianity is peace and love, the heartbeat of Islam is hatred, it's violence, it's subjugation, it's control by power. That's what you can see in every single country that adopts Sharia law. There is a reason that Muslims were the ones who flew planes into the buildings on 9/11. There's a reason that Muslims are the chief group who commit acts of terror. There are massive amounts of rapes in the European countries where Muslim men are now immigrating to. This is not a coincidence. Welcome to the Owen Stevens Show. This is a pretty urgent show. I think everyone's seen online over Instagram news reports of the rising Islamist threat that we face in America today. Most recently with the election of Zoran Mamdani, who is openly Muslim, shares a lot of those viewpoints. And we just need to have an honest conversation about what Islam is. What is this? For years, the policy of the United States and European countries has been to treat Islam with kid gloves. It's classified Islam just as it's classified other religions, just like Christianity. It's nothing but a different form of Christianity, so peaceful and amazing and pleasant. Islam has been classified even above Christianity as untouchable, where, as in this country, Christians can get persecuted, Christians can get treated horribly, their religion can be bashed. Islam sort of maintained a protected status, with President Barack Obama, for instance, claiming Islam was a religion of peace and promoting this Islamophobia idea, which quickly spread across the country. The idea that Muslims were the subject of persecution and this rising threat of Islamophobia that threatened everything. It was pushed on us in a very extreme way. If you criticized Islam, if you criticized anything that the Quran or the Prophet Muhammad or the followers who submit to that lifestyle and law and regulation and legal code and religious code, if you criticized any of them, you were guilty of Islamophobia. Of course, there's nothing such that exists for Christianity. There's no Christianophobia. Anybody can criticize Christianity or Christians at any time. There's no one preventing them from doing so, nor should there be. They should be allowed to criticize Christianity, although that's silly and dumb, and people do and have for all of human history. But why is it that Islam maintained a protected status for so long, even though Islam has proven to be, and will always prove to be, a violent, hateful religion? It is the heartbeat of Islam. Whereas the heartbeat of Christianity is peace and love, the heartbeat of Islam is hatred, it's violence, it's subjugation, it's control by power. That's what you can see in every single country that adopts Sharia law. This isn't difficult. There is a reason that Muslims were the ones who flew planes into the buildings on 9/11. There's a reason that Muslims are the chief group who commit acts of terror worldwide. There's a reason that Muslim countries subjugate women. There are massive amounts of rapes in the European countries where Muslim men are now immigrating to. This is not a coincidence. This isn't to hate Muslim people. This is not what this episode is about. We want to love everyone. And in fact, Jesus is touching Muslim men across the world. This isn't about the people. The people who are under Islam, under that influence of a very, very demonic religion, a very, very demonic belief system, are people. God loves them. They're God's, hopefully, his future children that will come to faith in Jesus Christ. Obviously, that is the goal I want. That's the goal that most Christians want. But we cannot also ignore what Islam is. We need to love the people, but be honest about what this belief system is. We're honest about the believers of Nazism. We're honest about them. For some reason, we've been able to be honest about the threats to freedom throughout our world history, throughout the West's history. Fascism was denounced. Communism was denounced. The people that believed in those disgusting ideologies were also denounced. But it seems today the main threat is Islam, specifically Islamism or extreme Islam. Not all Muslims are extreme, but there are many, and I repeat, many who are. And the essential question, as Ayaan Hirsi Ali puts it, this is straight from Ayaan Hirsi Ali, will the vast majority of peaceful Muslims throughout the world adopt the more radical version of Sharia law, or will they adopt the more reformed version of Islam? That's what we have to talk about. Hopefully, Islam can undergo massive reform, and the violent and the peaceful Muslims worldwide, which do absolutely represent a majority of the Muslims that are not actively waging war, committing jihad, influencing people through Sharia law, corrupting governments, etc., imposing jihad against the world in a violent way, all those horrible things. Hopefully, those peaceful Muslims go the way of the reformed Muslims that are trying to reform a very ancient and old and outdated form of their religion. However, it is not certain whether that's the case. We've seen in America, we've seen in London, we've seen in Britain, we've seen in the UK, we've seen in Dearborn, Michigan, that Islamists all over the country want to adopt the very radical, very evil, very demonic, very subjugating, very violent, very hateful method and ideology implicated in Sharia law. They want Sharia law. It's stated explicitly. How many videos do we have to see online scrolling? How many videos, true videos that are real, how many videos do we have to see on YouTube? How many times are we confronted with that in our political reality today, in our political landscape? It's obvious and it's clear. It's out of their own mouths. They want to spread Islam. They want to impose Sharia law. That is what they want to do. It's explicit in their religion. We're going to go into that in a little bit. Islam, and I've learned this all very recently as I've done deep dives to educate myself about what this religion states and how dangerous it actually is. And being honest about it is the most important thing. This is not any attempt to hate upon Muslim people. There are plenty, obviously, peaceful Muslims. That is not at all what I'm doing. But even the peaceful Muslims are engaging in a very interesting double standard and a contradiction, it seems. They are peaceful in a religion, submitting to a religion that insists you must be violent. Islam is not a religion that respects the right of other people to believe what they believe. Islam is a religion that commands its members to spread Islam to every single person, no matter who they are, until the entire world is under a caliphate, the control of Sharia law. That is what the Prophet Muhammad, their main role model, did. He tried first in Mecca to spread the ideals of a peaceful Islam. That's true. But then when he went to Medina, he waged war. It's explicitly stated in Muslim sources that Muhammad was a warlord who went around killing people. He would chop people's heads off, and he would impose Sharia law, which is a very, very rigorous and evil legal system that imposes penalties of, like Hammurabi's code, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth sort of thing. So if you get robbed, you have the right of blood guilt against the person who wronged you, those sorts of things. Does away with the idea of forgiveness. That's really not central to Islam at all. Violence is in fact central to Islam. Apostates are murdered. Thieves have their hands chopped off. People who engage in sexual immorality out of marriage can be stoned to death, can be killed. Women often are. Rape and the marriage of young children is condoned. The pedophilia even is condoned. Having sex or whatever it is called, consummating marriages of young women. Muhammad himself, the chief prophet of Islam, consummated his marriage with a 9-year-old. He wrote up the marriage contract when this girl, Aisha, her name is, when she was 6 years old, and then consummated the marriage when she was 9, staying with her for 9 years until she was 18. Usually, 18 is the number we look to begin marriage relations, even though that's very young. But in the West, it seems everything we believe is inherently incompatible with what Islam believes. That's very true. We're seeing it in Dearborn, Michigan today. We've even seen it as early as 2010. There was a lawsuit filed in 2010 where in Dearborn, Michigan, a group of Christian evangelists tried to evangelize Muslims and were arrested. They were detained in Dearborn, Michigan in 2010, and a lawsuit was filed to free those men from being illegally detained for preaching the gospel to Muslims, something, I guess, in Dearborn, Michigan, that's not allowed. This threat has been evident for a very long time. Now we're seeing the election of Zoran Mamdani. We're seeing the people. There was even a person from Somalia, I forget his name, I don't even have his name here, who was running in Minneapolis, he almost won. There are Muslims running for political offices across the country. This is a form of jihad. This is a form of waging war against the West. This is a form of trying to impose a caliphate. That is what Islam is all about. It is a group of, it is an ideology that wants to spread its law, its belief system in Muhammad and the Prophet, in its code across the entire world. And it's doing that. It's basically already done that across the entire UK, and it's doing that right now in America. We need to be honest about what Islam is and oppose it immediately. This is probably the greatest threat that we face today. I mean, this is the equivalent of Nazis gaining control in America in the 1940s. I mean, can you imagine if we had elected Nazis to political office during World War II? If we had elected people who knew and were sympathetic with Hitler to, offices in our country? And I think we even did that by bringing in CIA agents in Operation Paperclip, but that's neither here nor there. We're not going to go into that. But right now, what are we doing? We're electing people who are sympathetic to Islam, sympathetic to Muhammad, sympathetic to Sharia law, to positions of power in our country. That is directly contrary to the Constitution if they impose those laws or seek to impose them on American citizens. America and Islam are not compatible. They are two completely incompatible forces. America and Americanism insists on the freedom of religion, something that Islam blatantly opposes. Islam does not allow for the freedom of religion. It calls everyone who is not Islamic an apostate. They are somebody to either submit to Islam or be killed. That is specifically stated in the Quran, explicitly stated in Muslim holy texts, something that Muhammad himself actively did, the prophet they all look up to. Freedom of speech and expression is important in America as well. That's a founding value. It is also not allowed in Islam. For instance, you cannot make fun of, portray negatively, or portray at all the Prophet Muhammad. There have already been attacks in France and other European countries where people have tried to engage in criticism of the Prophet Muhammad. In doing so, they were made the target of Muslim extremists who came in to murder them, and in some cases did. There are several examples of satirical comic book pages in newspapers that have been attacked by Muslim extremists for portraying the Prophet Muhammad negatively. This is spreading to America. This is absolutely critical. This is dangerous. We need to be clear about the incompatibility of America and Islam. We cannot treat Islam with the kid gloves that we've treated it with for all of these years. Islam is not peaceful. It is violent. Islam is not a religion of love. It's a religion of hate. Islam is not a religion of freedom. It is a religion of control and power. Women are not respected, honored, or cherished in Islam. Women are considered to be half the value of a man in Islam. It's amazing to see liberal people, people of progressive values, embrace Islam as if it is some sort of progressive idol. This is a religion that completely subjugates women. It forces women to cover their bodies from head to toe under threat of violence in a lot of cases. It's also a religion that allows for child brides to be married. It abuses women on almost every single level. It abuses young women, children, little girls, and it abuses women of all ages. This is not debatable. I mean, in every single Muslim country, this is the case. If you want to listen to a good person who knows way more about this than I do, you should listen to Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She was a Muslim woman who escaped this horrifying lifestyle. Many women also want to escape. Not all. Many women, if given the chance, would wage jihad just as the men do. So this is not some case where, excusing all of women. There are actual cases, and I've been informed by people in my life who know more than me. I assumed that every Muslim sort of wanted to be that way, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe many women, maybe even men, are wanting to get out but feel as if they can't because their lives are threatened. Maybe that's true. But there are certainly Muslim people, hundreds of millions across the world, who do not feel that way at all, who feel as if it is their duty to spread Islam to every corner of the globe and to topple the great Satan called America and the little Satan called Israel. That's specifically in countries like Iran. We need to be honest about what Islam is. We need to be honest about its history, and we cannot treat it with kid gloves or glaze it or whitewash it clean. It's not clean. It's dangerous and deadly. Every single country that has embraced Islam and been irresponsible with its immigration policies is now collapsing under the weight of an influx of Muslim men. Rapes are on the increase. Sexual violence is on the increase. And this is no coincidence. Muslim men are indoctrinated into a system wherein women are basically property, can be beaten by their husbands legally, you can marry young women legally, you can consummate marriage and have pedophilia legally under Sharia law in the code. It's a code that allows men and women to violently attack people if they disobey the code of Sharia law. This isn't compatible with the West. It's not compatible. Our laws are incompatible with their laws. If they come here trying to impose Sharia law, which they are doing in places like Dearborn, Michigan, they're already doing it in places all over the UK, where irresponsible people are electing Muslim people because of how much Islam has been whitewashed. People seriously view Islam as something that's not even threatening. That's why they're getting elected all over the country. They don't even know what these people believe or what they truly stand for. Islam is the biggest subversion happening in our country today. It's not just communism. I would say Islam is probably bigger. You go into countries like New York City, you don't even recognize it. It doesn't even look like an American city anymore. And pretty soon it won't. If people like Zoran Mamdani have their way, and if we keep electing Muslim extremists, Islamists to positions of power, we should not be electing Muslims to positions of power. We should not be electing naturalized citizens, people that have come in from other countries, to positions of power. It's essential that the people who run our government and are in positions of power be born here, live here, grow up here, value America. It is not certain, and it is not true, that people born in other countries value America like American citizens value America. At least that's how it should be. Not always the case. There are plenty of immigrants who come across from other countries who value America more than the people born here. Almost entirely because of how horrible conditions were in the country they came from. But we have a bunch of people that are coming from other countries right now who are intent on making America just as the country they left, the country that was horrifying, the country that was marred in war. And that same ideology, that same toxic doctrine, they're seeking to bring here. They will stop at nothing until it happens. We need to go into some facts. I won't be long. I'll end the show. This is something I'm very passionate about. Islam is not a religion of peace. It needs to be said that Islam is not a religion of peace. Some facts. Wave of Muslim rape cases across Europe. This is rising. Ayan Hirsi Ali has the position that because there is such a massive influx of Muslim migrants into Europe, the rape rises are attributable to that. I happen to agree. This is a question that they're not using in the parliament right now. They're doing everything they can to whitewash this issue and make it seem as if Islam is a religion of peace. Anything you look up on Google, by the way, Google and the internet has whitewashed the truth about actual Islam. If you go and read the Quran, if you go and read their holy texts, you'll see how problematic it is. Not only are there innumerate of contradictions that render it just a theological mess, but there are also disgusting and horrifying examples of violence, hatred, abuse, pedophilia, sexual perversion, riddled throughout the Islamic holy texts. So it's no wonder that the people who believe and espouse those ideologies would commit those atrocities and commit those same things and believe in that lifestyle. After all, it is their holy book. After all, that is their prophet. A woman is raped every 3 hours in Pakistan. That's a stat for you. 65% of those underage girls and 1 in 4 of those victims is a victim of group rape in the country of Pakistan. This is in a study in 1999. How much worse has it gotten since then? How much worse has it gotten since then? Let me go to my notes on this issue so we can talk a little bit about this. There are horror stories, absolute horror stories throughout Islam, throughout the countries that embrace Islam. Repeatedly, for instance, this should go out to all of the women who believe that Islam is somehow popular or something good or, something that they want here. I don't know why. I don't know why that would be the case. But I guess it is somehow the case. I'm going to try to find my notes here, if I can find my notes here. There we go. So, there's 3 groups of Islamists that we can talk about. The first group is the most problematic. These are the fundamentalists who envision, this is all from Ayan Hirsi Ali. Ayan Hirsi Ali, This is her theory, a theory I agree on. There's three groups of Muslims. The fundamentalists, who envision a regime based on Sharia law, Islamic religious law. They argue for an Islam largely or completely unchanged from its original 7th century version and take it as a requirement of their faith that they impose it on everyone else. She calls them and nicknamed them Medina Muslims, mimicking what Muhammad did in Medina, which was wage war against the unbelievers, in that they see the forcible imposition of Sharia as their religious duty, following the example of the Prophet Muhammad when he was based in Medina. They exploit their fellow Muslims' respect for Sharia law as a divine code that takes precedence over civil laws. It is only after they have laid this foundation that they are able to persuade their recruits to engage in jihad. The second group, the clear majority throughout the Muslim world, consist of the peaceful Muslims who are loyal to the core creed and worship devoutly, but are not inclined to practice violence or even intolerance towards non-Muslims. You could call those groups, as Ayan Hirsi calls them, Mecca Muslims. The fundamental problem is that the majority of otherwise peaceful or law-abiding Muslims are unwilling to acknowledge, much less to repudiate, the theological warrant for intolerance and violence embedded in their own religious texts. More recently, and corresponding with the rise of Islamic terrorism, a third group is emerging with Islam, Muslim reformers, or as Ayan Hirsi Ali calls them, modifying Muslims, who promote the separation of religion from politics and other reforms. Although some are apostates, the majority of dissidents are believers, among them clerics who have come to realize that the religion must change if its followers are not to be condemned to an interminable cycle of political violence. That's from Ayan Hirsi Ali. Basically, the problem is this. Are the majority of peaceful Muslims in the country going to adopt Sharia law, or are they going to adopt the reform idea of Sharia law? I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I hope to God that those Muslims see the light and that they do not obviously adopt those horrifying positions. So, let me go into some horror stories. Talk a little bit about Sharia law. Women are considered, under the code of Sharia law, to be half a man. Sharia subordinates women and men in a multitude of ways. This is according to Ayan Hirsi Ali again. The requirement of guardianship by men, the requirement of men to beat their wives, the right of men to have unfettered sexual access to their wives, the right of men to practice polygamy, and the restriction of women's legal rights in divorce cases, in estate laws, in cases of rape, in court testimony, and in consent to marriage. Egyptian-born author Nani Darwish explains what it was like to grow up in Egypt under Sharia law. This is a quote from Nani Darwish. For the first 30 years of my life, I lived as a virtual slave. Darwish goes on to explain that Sharia deals with all aspects of day-to-day life, including politics, economics, banking, business law, contract law, marriage, divorce, child rearing and custody, sexuality, sin, crime, and social issues. It makes no distinction between public and private life, treating all aspects of human relations as governable by Allah's law. The Sharia law, the Sharia law are based on the Quran and the Hadiths, citing examples from the prophets, as well as centuries of debate, interpretation, and precedent. She also says it allows women seen without a headdress to be flogged, punishes rape victims, and calls for the beheading for adultery. She never questioned it or challenged it, or ever thought about its validity. A Muslim woman who commits adultery is to be stoned to death. Unmarried girls who have sex must be flogged. Women's testimony in court is half the value of a man. Women get the half inheritance of a man. There is no community property between husbands and wives. If a woman is killed, her indemnity money is half the indemnity money of a man. If her family follows Shafi'i law and her, it's just ridiculous. Listen to this. If her family follows Sharia law, then her clitoris must be removed at a young age. That is female castration, in order for a man to make sure her sexual appetite is suppressed. She needs her guardian's permission to marry, or else it is void. She needs her husband's or male's relatives' permission for travel. She must cover all of her body except her face and hands. People don't talk about that enough. Female genital mutilation is a common practice in Islamic countries. The removal of the clitoris. There's a horrifying story that Ayan Hirsi Ali tells of a 13-year-old girl in Somalia who was found guilty of adultery after reporting that she had been raped by 3 men. Unlike the 13-year-old girl from Ohio who told Obama that she was scarred because someone might scorn her, Aisha Ibrahim Dunlo, named after the Prophet Muhammad's 9-year-old wife, was dragged screaming and flailing into a stadium in Kismayo to be stoned. It took 4 men to bury her up to her neck in the hole. Then 50 men spent 10 minutes pelting her with rocks and stones. After 10 minutes had passed, there was a pause. She was dug out of the ground, and 2 nurses examined to see if she was still alive. Someone found a pulse and breathing. Ayesha was returned to the hole, and the stoning continued. Follow the Sharia stoning. A local sheikh told the radio station that Ayesha had provided evidence, confirmed her guilt, and was happy with the punishment under Islamic law. Does that sound like something we want to adopt into America? Does that something that we want to treat? Does that sound like something we want to treat with kid gloves? Does that sound like something that we want to be bury our heads in the sand towards and ignore and let permeate? Does that sound peaceful to you? Is Islam a religion of peace? Or isn't it? The fact of the matter is, it has never been and never will be a religion of peace. It is not. It is a counterfeit to Christianity. Any attempt to call it a religion of peace is a laughable joke mocking Christianity, mocking Jesus. Islam is satanic, demonic, and should be expelled from our country, expelled from our nation. Every trace of it should be annihilated through the use of dialogue and through the use of culture change. Willing culture change, not violence, obviously. But we should be waging a culture war against this disgusting ideology, and we need to start now. There is no other time to start to expel this disgusting belief system before it takes our country over, and mark my words, it threatens to do so. It threatens to do so sooner than you think. People like Zoran Mamdani are just the beginning. Our country faces a very real threat. Women face a very real threat. We should look to the example, the negative example set by the European countries that have been incredibly irresponsible in their treatment and understanding of Islam, demonstrating a complete naivete to what Islam actually is, and they're seeing the destruction of their entire country as we speak. We need to take a note. We need to jot that note down and recognize that what we are allowing to happen in our cities, in Dearborn, Michigan, in New York City, is dangerous by letting in Islamists, treating them as if they are like any other religious group, when in fact they are not. They pose a threat to the country. They pose a threat to freedom. What they believe in is contrary to the very founding documents and values of America. America and Islam, like I said and will always say, do not belong and can never belong together, period. They don't go together. They are fundamentally mutually exclusive to one another. You can have one, but you cannot have the other. We need to fight for, with our dying breath, Americanism, which establishes the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom of enterprise, rights for all people recognized under God, that our Creator created all of us equal, and that we fundamentally have rights given to us by God to be protected by the government. That is not Islam. Islam threatens to impose something disgusting, far worse, where women don't have rights, where no one has the right to practice Christianity, and pretty soon we're going to see waves of violence as the people who purport that they believe what the Quran states and the Hadith state, they believe that, it comes out of their own mouths. We should take them at their word. They believe it, they are going to perpetrate it. If we do not take them at their word, that they are going to wage jihad, that they are going to found Sharia law courts, that they are going to try to subvert our country from within, we are fools. We should take them at their word right now. That is one of the biggest threats that our country faces. And I cannot stand or sit on the sidelines anymore and not speak out against the violent and hateful, despicable, contrary to all that is good religion of Islam. That's the end of the show today, everyone. God bless. Pray for Muslims today. Pray for Muslims today. Go into our prayer closets. Let's pray to the Lord that Muslims get touched by the love of Jesus, or that at the very least, Muslims are able to adopt a reformed version of their faith and not embrace violent extremism and fundamentalism that is present within their religion and culture. This is not a culture that we can adopt here in America. Multiculturalism is bad. American culture needs to prevail against the rise of the Islamic threat. People like Zoran Mamdani and others are just Trojan horses to implement this religion, this regime, this belief system, this toxic crap into our society. It needs to be opposed. It needs to be opposed peacefully, with love, but with truth. Everyone, this is the Owen Stevens Show. God bless. Have a great day for faith and for freedom.